Okay, I guess we're ready for the story. You know, one of the wonderful things about learning traditional stories is you begin to discover all around the world so many similar themes and interests and messages that come from the stories. They're different, but they're similar. When you learn about stories, that's when you really understand we're all just one big family together. I'm always telling that to the kids. Well, everywhere in the world, people tell stories about ghosts. And I'm going to tell the story that's so popular around here. I've known it ever since I was a kid. It's a very, very old story. Es una historia muy antigua, a very old story. It started many, many years ago. Comenzó en un pueblito pero muy chiquito. It started in a tiny little village. Ooh, in that village, there was a girl who was beautiful. Everyone said she had to be the prettiest girl for 500 miles around. Some people would take a look at that girl. They'd say, oh, será la muchacha más hermosa de todo el mundo. That must be the most beautiful girl in the whole world, they would say. Y la muchacha se llamaba María. That was her name. Her name was Maria. And because she was so beautiful, she thought she was better than everybody else. Era de buena familia, tenía buena casa, tenía la ropa bonita. Nunca se daba por satisfecho. Even though she came from a good family, they had a nice house to live in, she had pretty clothes to wear, she was never satisfied. She should have even better things. She got to be a young woman. She would have nothing to do with the young men from her village. They weren't good enough for her. Many times when she was walking with her grandma in the evening, you know, the way young girls would do back in the old days, she would say to her grandma, Abuelita, cuando yo me case, voy a casarme con el hombre más guapo de todo el mundo. She was always telling her grandma that when I get married, grandma, cuando yo me case, I am going to marry the most handsome man in the whole world. Her grandma would just look at her and shake her head. Maria would go right on talking. She'd look across the hillside. She'd say, his hair will be as black and as shiny as the raven I see sitting on the tree over there. Cuando camine, vamos a la fuerza y la gracia del caballo que mi abuelito tiene en su corral. When that man walks along, he'll look as strong and as graceful as the stallion my grandpa has in the corral. Her grandma would say to her, Maria, caras vemos, corazones no sabemos. Ooh, that's an old saying around here. Caras vemos, corazones no sabemos. Es cierto. It's a true old saying. We can see people's faces. Caras vemos. We don't know what's in people's hearts. Her grandma would tell her, if you're going to marry a man, you make sure that he's a good man, that he has a good heart in him. Why do you always think about a man's face and how handsome he looks? Maria would say to herself, estas viejitas tienen las ideas tan anticuadas. These old ladies, she would say, They have old-fashioned ideas. My grandma doesn't know anything. She wouldn't listen to her grandmother. And then one day, a man came to that little town. It looked like he was the man she had always been talking about. He was strong and handsome. He had worked as a cowboy. Podía montar cualquier caballo. He could ride any horse. If he had a horse and it got well trained, he would give that horse away. He would go catch a wild horse. He didn't think it was manly. No era cosa varonil, cosa de hombre, montar ningún caballo que no fuera medio bronco. He didn't think it was manly to ride a horse if it wasn't half wild. He could play the guitar, he could sing beautifully, and Maria made up her mind that was the man she would marry. But I already told you how proud she was. I'm sure you can figure out she would not let him know how she felt. If they would meet along the road and he would say hello to her, she would just look away. He would go to her house in the evenings and stand outside and sing a serenade to her. She wouldn't even go to the window. Before long, the cowboy started saying to himself, "Eso orgullosa de María. Yo puedo conquistar su corazón. Creo que voy a casarme con esa chica. Ooh, I can win that proud girl's heart. I think I'm going to marry that girl." Everything was turning out exactly the way Maria wanted it to. Before long, they were engaged to be married. Her parents tried to warn her. They told her, "No te cases con aquel hombre. Él no puede ser marido bueno y confiable." Do you think she listened to her parents? They told her he's not going to make a good, trustworthy husband. But she went right ahead and married the man. And at first, everything seemed to be fine. They had 2 children. People thought they were a happy family. But a few years rolled by, and the cowboy went back to the wild life out on the prairies. He would leave the town. He would stay away from home for months at a time. When he did come home, he would say to Maria, "Pues yo no vine a visitarte a ti. Quisiera pasar un rato con mis hijos nomás. I didn't come here to visit you. I just wanted to spend a little bit of time with my children." He would sit and play with the children for a little while, and then he would go off and spend the whole night with his friends, gambling, drinking wine. Hasta empezó a hablar de dejar al lado a María para casarse con una mujer rica. He even started telling his friends that he was going to put Maria aside so that he could marry a rich woman. As proud as Maria was, she became very jealous. Hasta empezó a tenerles envidia a sus propios hijos. She even started feeling jealous of her own children because he paid attention to the children. He would show affection to his children. He just ignored Maria. And then one evening, she was standing in front of the house. Her 2 children were right there beside her. He came riding along in a carriage con una dama elegante sentada a su lado. There was an elegant lady sitting beside him. Paró el coche. He stopped the carriage. Habló con sus hijos. He spoke to his children. Ni siquiera echó un vistazo a María. He did not even look at Maria. He just whipped the horses, pow, on down the road. When that happened, something seemed to explode inside Maria. She felt so much anger. She felt such jealousy. Y todo el mal sentimiento se dirigió contra sus hijos. All of those evil feelings turned against her children. Esta es la parte más dura de la historia. This is the really hard part of the story. Agarró a los dos hijos por el brazo y los arrastró hasta el río. She grabbed her children by the arm and dragged them to the river. It is a terrible thing to tell.
I think I figured it out.
But they say that she threw her own children into the river. But when she saw them carried away by the water, se dio cuenta de lo que había hecho. She realized what she had done. She started running down the river bank. She was reaching out her arms as if she could get her children back from the water. No, ya quedaron perdidos. Those children were long gone. She ran and she ran. She was driven along by the guilt and the anger that was filling her heart. She was not paying attention to where she was going. One of her feet got tangled up on a root. She tripped, and when she fell forward, her forehead struck a rock y quedó muerta. She was killed. The next day, her family looked for her all over the town. Of course, they couldn't find her. And then somebody brought the word to the town that her body was lying out there on the bank of the river. Fueron allá, la encontraron y la enterraron. They went out there and they found her and they buried her. La enterraron en el mero sitio donde había caído. They buried her right on the same spot where she had fallen. But from the first night that she was in the grave, no conciliaba la paz. She could not find peace. She would rise up. She would go walking all along the bank of the river. Estaba vestida con un manto largo y retorcido, como los en que vestían a los muertos para enterrarlos en aquellos tiempos. She was dressed in that long, winding white sheet, the way they would dress a dead person to bury them back in those days. The people saw her moving among the trees. They could hear her voice crying and crying in the night. Sometimes they thought it was just the wind they were hearing, the wind blowing through the trees. But other times, if they listened more carefully, they were sure they were hearing words. Of course, the words would be in Spanish. It would sound something like this. Mis ¿Dónde están mis hijos? Where are my children? That's what she kept crying. ¿Dónde están mis hijos? She would go all up and down the banks of the river. She walked through the arroyos up into the mountains. She would come back down along ditches and canals, along the acequias. Night after night, the people saw her. But much more often, they would hear her crying far off in the darkness. Mis hijos. That is why before long, no one spoke of her as Maria anymore. Le pusieron el nombre La Llorona. They gave her the name La Llorona, the crying woman, the weeping woman. And they would say to the children, when it gets dark outside, métanse dentro de la casa. Get back into the house, they told the kids, when it gets dark. La Llorona puede estar por aquí, buscando a sus hijos. La Llorona might be around here, they would say. She's looking for her children, but she's so crazy. She can think any child she sees is one of her children. If she sees you, she'll grab you and she'll carry you away. Or she might even throw you into the river like she did to her own children. You will never be seen again. Y se cuenta que a través de los años, muchos niños han sido llevados por la Llorona. They say that many children down through the years have been carried away by La Llorona. But I've never seen her, so I'm not going to tell you it's really a true story.
The story is called The Plate, Bancho Sarayashiki. Long time ago, when Tokyo was still called Edo, Japan was ruled by generations of shoguns, the highest ranked samurai. People were tired of having battles all the time. So to avoid the conflicts, the shogun decided to close all the ports to the foreign countries. Japan entered the period of peace. Samurais no longer had to go to war. They would live in big houses with many servants, and they worked in the offices for governments or the police force. What utmost important to them was keeping their honor and pride, their wealth, and above anything, the family line. More than 300 years ago, there lived a samurai family named the Aoyamas, which means Blue Mountain. They were one of the wealthy families. The master couple was very proud and known for being very strict with their houseworkers. The housemaids feared them. Among them was Okiku, which means the chrysanthemum. She was young and beautiful. She had beautiful black hair, bright red lips, and a fair skin like a doll. And she was a very modest and hard worker. Master Aoyama had an eye on her. He wanted to make her his mistress. Every time he had a chance, he would try to be alone with her. Poor Okiku. She was put in this very difficult place. If she says yes, Lady Aoyama will be furious at her. But if she says no, Master Aoyama will be very offended. Hey, Okiku, I have something to show you. Come and follow me to the back storage room. Oh, Master? Oh, well, seems like Lady Aoyama is calling me. I must go now. Excuse me. She always tried so hard to avoid the worst. One evening, after a big dinner party, she was in the kitchen, cleaning up and putting things away. The couple was very particular about leftovers getting thrown away at once. Nobody was allowed to take it even if the food was untouched. They considered it bad manners. A cat came into the kitchen. Oh, little kitten, no, you can't be here. Oh, no, don't touch the food. I'll be scolded. Oh, no, don't. The cat jumped on the kitchen counter, walked closer to the plate to lick it, and knocked the plate off the counter. Lady Aoyama came into the kitchen and saw the broken plates. How dare you, Okiku? How dare you break our family precious heirloom plate? There is a set of 10 now. We only have 9 plates. You will never be able to replace this. Oh, Lady Aoyama, please forgive me. Please. I'm so sorry. I am so sorry. You will pay for this. Come. She grabbed Okiku's arm and took her to the secret room where she punished her workers and started yelling at her, calling her names. The master Aoyama heard the noise and came to the room as well. He didn't want his wife to think that he's very easy on Okiku because of his feelings towards her. So he decided to be extra harsh with her. That is not enough. And he started hitting Okiku out of 10 precious plates, we are missing one. Let's see. You seem to have 10 sets of fingers. I will show you how it feels like to lose one of a set of 10. Saying so, he cut off Okiku's finger. Shh. Okiku was bleeding. He kept her in the secret room to punish her hard. Okiku, the chrysanthemum, couldn't bear it any longer. She escaped from the room and jumped into the well to end her suffering. A few days later, her sandals were found by the well. Nobody knew what happened to her. The master couple told everyone that Okiku, the chrysanthemum, suddenly fell ill, and despite all the cares and medical treatments they got for her, she passed away. The house servants whispered to each other that maybe she was killed. But they kept their mouths shut. Around the same time, the rumors started from nowhere and spread all over the block. People would hear a sad, sobbing voice of a woman coming from the well. Then they would see a female ghost. She's young and beautiful with pale skin and red lips. She's bleeding on her hand, and she sobs quietly while she counts. Ichimai, one plate. Nimai, two plates. Samai, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Oh, missing one. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Oh. People were terribly scared of this ghost, but no one could explain what this woman ghost would be. They were so horrified that no one would go near the well, and slowly they stopped talking about it. Few years passed by. People forgot about the Okiku. The Aoyamas had a baby. It was a boy. The Aoyamas were filled with joy.
Looks like it. The normal don't look like it.
Am I gone? I'm sorry, the sound is having a little problem. Okay. The Aoyamas were filled with joy for having the heir to the family they had wished for a long time. Well, there was a dark secret that they wanted to hide from everyone. The baby was missing a finger. However, people began to realize the baby only had 9 fingers. People in town started talking about the Aoyamas again. It was a strange coincidence between the ghost counting a missing plate and the baby missing 1 finger. Eventually, everybody figured out what had happened to poor Okiku and how the Aoyamas treated all the people around them. The Aoyamas were deeply disgraced, and the shogun ordered them to be exiled. They were no longer allowed to use their family name Aoyamas, Blue Mountain. Back in those days, this meant that all of their rights, income, houses, and needless to say, their honor and pride were taken away from them for good.
Oh, that was really spooky. But I think I'll kind of change things a little bit. It's getting kind of late, so maybe we can all go away with a little bit of a chuckle in our voice instead of such a scary kind of feeling. I think I'll tell you a story that I learned in Peñasco Elementary, here in Peñasco, New Mexico, probably 40 years ago. And they told me it happened right here in New Mexico. It happened in a tiny little village in the mountains. Well, there was a girl who lived in that village. She was beautiful. She was so pretty. 4 young men in that little town all fell in love with the same girl. She was not interested in any of those. Did I say 4? I meant 3. She was not interested in any of those 3 young men. And they just about drove her crazy, always trying to get her attention. Almost every night, one of them would show up at her house and stand outside and sing love songs to her. Sometimes 2 of them would come on the same evening. Sometimes all 3 of them would show up on the same evening. They would sound like a bunch of alley cats out there. Each one would try to be the loudest and the most heartbroken with his song. In the daytime, they would come racing past her house on fast horses, trying to impress her. No matter how much she told them she wasn't interested or didn't even like them, they wouldn't leave her alone. She couldn't walk through the town without one of them coming up to her to try to start a conversation or hand her a flower. So she went to the carpenter in that little village. She said to the carpenter, "¿Cuánto me vas a cobrar para hacer un ataúd? How much will you charge me to make a coffin?" He told her what he would normally charge. She said she would pay him twice that much if he would build a coffin without telling anybody about it and then take it out to the old empty house that was at the edge of the village. Everyone knew about that old house. Everyone said, "Ooh, Es una casa donde penan. Hay un ánima que anda penando en esa casa. That is a haunted house, they would say. There is a soul suffering in that old house. Well, it was all agreed upon. And then the next time the girl was walking through the village, one of the young men came up to her to start a conversation. And she said to him, you know that old empty house at the edge of the village? If you would go to that house at 11:30 tonight, you will see an empty coffin in the house. And if you're brave enough to light a candle at the head of that coffin and then lie there and cover your face like a dead man and lie there all night long, I might like to talk to you from time to time. He said he wasn't afraid to do that. Well, it was not very long until the second young man spoke to her. And she said to that young man, you know that old empty house at the edge of the village? If you will go to that house at 15 minutes before midnight tonight, you'll see a coffin in the house. You'll see a dead man lying in the coffin. And if you're brave enough to pull a chair over by the coffin and sit there and pray over that dead body all night long, I might like to get to know you a little bit better. He said he was going to do it too. And then, of course, it wasn't very long before the third young man spoke to her. She said to him, you know that old empty house out there at the edge of the village, don't you? If you would go to that house at exactly midnight tonight, you will see a coffin in the house and a dead man lying in that coffin. And there's another ghost that sits and prays over that dead body all night long. And if you're brave enough to dress yourself up like the devil, with cow horns tied on your head and your face all covered with charcoal, and you dance around those two ghosts all night long, I would enjoy the pleasure of your company. He said he was going to do it too. So that night, the girl went to the house. The carpenter had carried the coffin out to the house, just as she had told him to do. So she went and hid in a back room to see what would happen. At 11:30, she saw the first young man arrive. She saw him strike a match and light a candle and put it by the head of the coffin. She saw him trembling as he climbed into the coffin. And then he lay back and he covered his face with a cloth. He folded his arms over his chest and he lay there, perfectly still. 15 minutes later, the second young man arrived. He found a chair and dragged it over beside the coffin. He sat down and he started to pray. She could hear his voice quivering as he was praying. She could hear the rosary beads rattling in his fingers. And then just at midnight, the one who was praying happened to glance over at the door. And he said, "Ay, Dios mío, es el diablo." "Oh, my Lord," he said, "it's the devil." And when the young man lying in the coffin heard him say that, he came jumping up out of the coffin. And he said to the devil, "You're not going to get me yet." And he jumped out a window and he ran away down the road. But when the young man who was dressed like the devil saw what he thought was a dead man come flying up out of a coffin and then go diving out a window, he was so scared that he turned around and ran down the road right behind him. The two of them ran away down the road. The dead man kept saying, "No, no," and the devil was behind him at every step he took. But the one who was praying, he didn't get out of the chair. He didn't stop praying. He sat there praying louder and louder and louder. The girl was impressed with him. She came out of her hiding place. She said to him, tú sí eres valiente. You really are brave, she said. Tú no corriste. You didn't run away. The young man turned his white face toward her. He said, ¿Cómo quieres que corra? How do you expect me to run? He said, se me engancharon los pantalones en un clavo. My pants got stuck on a nail, he said. But just then the nail popped out of the chair. He fell to the floor face first, and then he jumped up and he ran down the road after the other two. The next day, the girl told all her friends what had happened, and her friends told all their families about it. Before long, everybody in the village had heard the story, and those three young men were so embarrassed, they never bothered her again. And they say that even today, in that little town, if someone does something that seems like it took a lot of courage and they start to brag about how brave they are, people will say, oh, maybe you're brave, or maybe your pants just got caught on a nail. So the next time somebody brags to you about how much courage they have, tell them, your pants just got caught on a nail. And they're going to say, what do you mean? And then you'll have to tell them that story so they'll understand.
I hope I can remember that story to tell when it happens. I will tell you a story called Botandoro, or the peony lantern. The lantern's made of paper and the peony flowers painted on. The story goes like this. 昔々、それはお盆の自分のことでした。Long time ago, it was the Obon festival, where people honor their ancestors by welcoming their spirits back to earth for a few days. It's like Day of the Dead here. There lived a man named Shinojo. He sat in front of his house, very sad and depressed. He had recently lost his wife. As night descended on Shinojo and his empty house, he saw a light in the distance. It bobbed back and forth, getting bigger and bigger until it became two figures. One was a woman who held the lantern adorned with painted peony flowers. But it was the other figure that made Shinojo gasp. She had the most beautiful face he had ever seen. Her skin was so luminous that it glowed in the moonlight. She bowed modestly to him and began to pass by him. He didn't know why, but he didn't want to let them go. So he stood straight up and greeted them. こんばんは。私は新之丞と申すものです。Good evening. My name is Shinojo. I live in this house. Are you in a hurry? Would you keep me company on this quiet Obon evening? This is the first Obon after my family loss. I'm very lonely. The woman answered with a faint voice, saying her name was Otsuyu, which means the dew. And the other one, holding the lantern, was her servant. She felt sorry for his recent loss and decided to keep him company. Otsuyu went inside the house with Shinojo, while her servant stayed outside holding the peony lantern. Otsuyu said that she lived near the village temple. She was nice and sweet. Shinojo enjoyed talking to her and began to like her. They spent the night together. She stayed with him the entire night, but had to leave early before dawn. She just said, では、失礼いたします. Well, excuse me then. The next evening, to Shinojo's surprise and delight, Otsuyu visited again. And again, they spent the night together. After that, he forgot about his dead wife. Shinojo became crazy about her. He stopped taking care of himself, stopped leaving the house, stopped caring about anything really, and only waited for Otsuyu's nightly visit. She will come with the servant holding the peony lantern. People around his house could hear their sandal footsteps nightly. Krong, 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 krong. Shinojo's neighbors began to worry about his strange behavior. One night, one of the neighbors, an old man, heard a woman's voice from inside Shinojo's house. He peeked inside. The sight appalled him. There was a Shinojo in futon, in the arms of a woman, but she was no regular woman. Her skin was rotting off her bones. Her voice sounded human, but it emerged from the mouth of a skeleton. Shinojo was laying with a decomposing corpse. The next morning, the old neighbor confronted Shinojo and revealed what he saw. Shinojo was shocked. My Otsuyu. Skeleton. Rotting. The old man warned Shinojo that if he kept meeting with the ghost, it would eventually drain the life form from him and kill him. Shinojo remembered that she had told him Otsuyu had lived near the temple, so he went to look for her for some kind of a clue. There, sure enough, he found a peony lantern lying on top of a grave. Her grave. Shinojo told the Buddhist priest at the temple what happened, and the priest gave him a spirit-repelling charm to place outside his home. So he did. Otsuyu did not come that night, nor the next, nor the one after that. But love is not easily forgotten, and Shinojo became depressed and indulged himself in drink. One drunken night, he stumbled to Otsuyu's grave, and she appeared to him as beautiful as he remembered. She invited him to her home. After a few days, neighbors became worried. They searched Shinojo's house and looked all over town, but could not find him anywhere. Finally, someone decided to open Otsu's grave. And there he was, naked, embracing the rotten skeleton of Otsuyu. And he was very much dead. They say sometimes on dark, cloudy nights, people would hear the sound of footsteps, clong, 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 and see Otsuyu, her servant, and Ogiwara Shinojo walking together. And those same people would fall ill afterwards. The Ogiwara family felt worried that the ghosts were hurting people, so they called in a Buddhist priest. He explained that when a person dies, strong emotions may force their spirit to linger on earth instead of passing to the afterlife. The priest performed a ritual, releasing the three spirits from the earthly realm forever.